Good morning, Dan and Amy. Speaking of our friend and brother in sound, Dennis Prager, Prager University released a new video last week featuring Jordan Peterson talking about who educates your children. It's worth a listen. And one of the distillations Jordan Peterson does of higher ed and just education in general in this country in terms of who's in charge, the leftist, postmodernist, cultural Marxist, bigots. There's only two categories of people. Two categories of people in this country, and thus in charge or not in charge.
You're an exemplar of your race, sex, or sexual preference. You're also either a victim or an oppressor. No wrong can be done by anyone in the former group, and no good by the latter. Such ideas of victimization do nothing but justify the use of power and engender intergroup conflict.
And that's what is happening in the Ivy League and Harvard specifically. It's happening all over, but there's a particular lawsuit at Harvard, as well as in K through 12 education, and most notably in New York City. You have Asian Americans who have been deemed by these leftist, postmodernist, cultural Marxist bigots to be oppressors, not victims. They're with us whites, according to the likes of Harvard and the Sandinistan mayor of New York City, de Blasio. Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. At Harvard, Dr. Betsy Nabel, she's the president of the teaching hospital at Harvard Medical School. She made the call to take down its prominent display of past medical legends at Harvard because there are too many white men that are that have their portraits up at the hospital. 30 portraits have to be taken down because the paintings reinforce that white men are in charge. So you see those white men that were great doctors apparently, and thus they're profiled in the teaching hospital. Their accomplishments don't matter. All that matters is their gender and their race. The merits of what they did in their lives doesn't matter. Only their race and their gender matter. You get the gist of this? Let me give you another example. This is from a pending lawsuit. Harvard and New York Times reporting on Friday, Harvard consistently rated Asian American applicants lower than others on traits like positive personality, likability, courage, kindness, and being widely respected. This is an analysis of more than 160,000 student records filed Friday by a group representing Asian American students in a lawsuit against the university. Asian Americans scored higher than applicants of any other racial or ethnic group on admissions measures like test scores, grades, extracurricular activities, according to the analysis. But the students' personal ratings significantly dragged down their chances of being admitted. So Harvard is doing an end run around anti-discriminatory policies by essentially pushing down the scores that are conferred for subjective criteria like your personality or your courage or your kindness. So denigrating the personal characteristics of Asian Americans as a group so as to avoid having to admit more on the merits than they would otherwise have to admit. How you like that? Is that the big, inclusive, tolerant left that we're told exists? How about Mayor de Blasio's plan in New York City? Eliminate the city's specialized high school's admissions test and replace it with the requirement that the top 7% of every middle school in New York City be admitted to a specialized high school. So it essentially eliminates the meritocratic approach, the applications process, for one that is predicated on demographics to the benefit of some minority groups at the expense of other minority groups like Asian Americans who just, as a group, perform better. Is that right? Is that consistent with meritocracy? Is that consistent with colorblindness? Is that consistent with kind of the anti-discriminatory environment in which we would all like to live? Judge people on the merits, on the content of their character? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Yukong Zhao. He is the president of the Asian American Coalition for Education. Mr. Zhao, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
So What is your organization's posture with respect to the lawsuit that's been filed against Harvard, the policy change that Mayor de Blasio in New York City is pushing, as well as just I think what we're starting to understand is more and more universities, in particular, doing what Harvard is doing, but getting away with it to this point.
Yeah, my organization strongly denounce any form of discrimination, in particularly the attempt to change admission standard, either in college admissions or in the high schools. We are appalled by Harvard, the discrimination evidence, committed by Harvard. They not only utilize racial stereotype. What's on that is they use racial balancing. According to Students for Fair Admission, each year Harvard always use racial statistic to have like some adjustment, and at the end of admission process, they try to balance all the student ratio, the different ratios according to last year. This is de facto racial code, has been banned by the U.S. Supreme Court since 1978. And that's immoral. Another point I want to emphasize, then they have nonsense about Asian American community. Asian American community are hardworking, one of the greatest contributors to this country. We have lowest crime rate. We have highest marriage stabilities. We have a lot of artists, a lot of scientists contributed to the American economic prosperity and engineering, technology innovation. So that kind of stereotype is totally nonsense.
So besides this lawsuit that was filed in federal court, what else can you do to fight back?
We already filed the complaint in 2015 with the Department of Justice. Department of Justice has started the investigation, and also we're pushing for the overall policy change. I want to mention something. In 2011, the Obama administration issued a policy guidance regarding college admission. But in that policy guidance, they never emphasized the ban of racial quota, the ban of using the higher standard against Asian American children, the ban of using the racial stereotype. But that policy more focused on how to, promote racial balancing. They treat people, look at people based on race, by skin color, not by the performance, by their character. So that is wrong. So currently, the policy on college admissions still Obama era's policy. So we want to push that, to be changed. We want to, have policy is color blind and also emphasize real all children's performance and also character.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Accounting professor at Pace University in New York, said in a piece that Bill McGurn wrote in the Wall Street Journal last week, for years, Asian Americans have been viewed as the model minority, quote unquote, quiet and well behaved. And it seems like a lot of Asian Americans are quiet no longer because they understand the threat that they're up against with respect to their children and their children's educational future. And that manifests itself in one respect with this protest against de Blasio's policy in New York, where you had 1,000 New Yorkers show up and protest at City Hall a week ago Sunday, and it was mostly Asian Americans. So is part of the approach to be more vocal, too, be more vocal in the political process, be more engaged in the political process, because you've got to hold politicians to account for the policy changes they're advocating to the detriment of, Asian families.
That is correct. I have, immigrated to the U.S. for more than 20 years. I would say ever since 2014 and ever since like California introduced SAI 5, try to restore the race-based college admission in California, ever since that, an Asian American community have waken up. Basically, we organize a lot of demonstrations and also organize this kind of civil complaint against this kind of racial discrimination. And the week before the demonstration in New York is another good sign. One thing I want to point it out: the New York mayor de Blasio, actually his act is a political cover because he failed Black and Hispanic community in the public school in New York from grade 3 to 8. The processing rate for Black and Hispanic children is only half as the processing rate of the white and Asian American children.
Yeah. So
really, he failed that.
This is
pretty much a political cover.
This is a great point, actually, right? What you're saying that so they're scapegoating Asian Americans for what they have failed to do, big city mayors, the Ivy League, even in terms of educating other groups, or the disproportionate performance of other groups or participation in the selective schools or in Ivy League schools by other groups. It's been a failure of the people who are in charge, so they're looking for scapegoats. It's white oppressors or it's Asian American kids who do too well in school.
Exactly. And also another thing, one of the biggest problem in this country is the teachers' union. In China, when we had the Cultural Revolutions, the Maoists really do not measure anybody's performance. Everybody, based on seniority. Currently, America, the teachers' union promotes this. Okay, they don't take measure on teachers. So in this case, many public school fails, and then they don't want to address the root cause of the public schools, the failure of public schools. They just use Asian American children as a scapegoat for their failure.
All right, he is Yukong Zhao, Mr. Yukong Zhao, who's the president of the Asian American Coalition for Education. Mr. Zhao, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.